Christian Bigotry Continued is the title of our program here on the Atheist Forum.
It never stops.
It never seems to stop, in spite of a federal constitution that is structured to protect us from all forms of bigotry. The Christians simply never give up trying to find ways to circumvent that and impose their religious idealism on all of us, whether we subscribe to it or not. I'm Ed Golly. I'm joined on the set by Joe Reinhardt, and this is the Atheist Forum coming to you from Tampa, Florida. Joe, we want to first pick up where we left off on our previous program talking about the commandments, and then we're going to talk about some of the issues of the day that involve the attempts by the religious right to impose their religious bigotry on us in spite of the laws that protect us and how the Supreme Court's helping to protect us from them. But Joe, let's back up to the commandments.
Right. Just had a couple of points, basically, to summarize the 10 derangements that we were discussing on last week's program. One point I wanted to make, which is not, of course, my own idea, but lots of people have commented on this, but it seems to escape many believers, and that is to just step back for a moment and think about what life on this planet would be like if the 10 Commandments actually were totally dedicated to the benefit of mankind. If there were prohibitions against rape and child abuse and slavery, war, any form of persecution, particularly persecution in the name of religion. I mean, if Jesus existed and he was master of the universe, he had to know in advance all of the horrible suffering that would ensue because of disputes on whether or not to fully submerge someone or just sprinkle their head when you baptize them, among hundreds of other problems. But he never said a word about that. If he had just said, look, don't ever persecute anyone in my name, think how different the world would be and the values we would have if those ideas were ingrained into the Constitution, or excuse me, were ingrained into the 10 Commandments rather than the Constitution. I want to quote Christopher Hitchens quickly, and then we'll move on to the news of the day. Christopher Hitchens asks, is it too modern to notice that there is nothing in the 10 Commandments about the protection of children from cruelty, nothing about rape, nothing about slavery, and nothing about genocide? Or is it too exactingly in context to notice that some of these very offenses are about to be positively recommended? So there you have it. Some of the most hideous ideas on the face of this planet are actually promoted in the 10 Commandments, and we have a list of them here along with the punishments, which we talked about last week. Now let's talk about this week.
On the site. And of course, speaking of faces, that's why Andrew Jackson ended up on the $20 bill, because he was the probably the most prolific eliminator of the Native Americans of all of our presidents, right? And just like you said, genocide and slavery are endorsed by the Christian religion. The native peoples were thought to not be real people. They certainly didn't subscribe to the Christian religion. They could be claimed that they didn't have a soul. They were just savages, so they were expendable. And for this guy was rewarded as an outstanding president. Just think if, didn't this God know that that our ancestors were going to find these people? That should have been commandment number 11. He could have sneaked it in, or 10A or something like that. Thou will not commit genocide against native people.
Well, we had the Bible as an example of how to handle these kinds of problems. Draw nigh to the city. If they don't want to be your slaves, wipe them out and leave nothing that breatheth. The Bible suggests that, commands it on more than one occasion. So Andrew Jackson was acting in the best interest of humanity and in the best interest of his God, as he understood him. And for that, he was rewarded with a place of honor in our national pantheon.
Christian bigotry, of course, is alive and well in the Boy Scouts of America, as they use that as a staple of American values, bigotry. Isn't that nice? Boy Scouts of America. They're in the news this week, this last week of June of 2016. They lifted their ban on having openly gay leaders and employees last year, but they still forbid atheists and agnostics from gaining membership. The rule based on the organization's so-called duty to God. The handbook for the Boy Scouts states a scout must be reverent toward God, faithful in his religious duties, and respectful of the convictions of others in matters of custom and religion. I think what's most disturbing about it is that that scout leaders must sign a document when joining the Boy Scouts of America that contains the phrase, quote, "The Boy Scouts of America maintains that no member can grow into the best kind of citizen without recognizing an obligation to God," unquote. So this is clear, just blatant, outright bigotry. You either subscribe to the superstition or you can't be the best citizen. That actually kind of goes back to the Eisenhower era too, right? Which is why he corrupted our Pledge of Allegiance and converted it into a prayer of allegiance.
Well, I think
and
it's been going on a lot longer than that. I would like to point out that by that standard,
Yep.
you'd be more than welcome in the Boy Scouts if you were David Koresh or Jeffrey Dahmer, who said that he was put here on this earth as an example by God, as an example to others. That was Dahmer's was a devout born-again Christian. Stephen Hawking, sorry, no can do, no room for you in the Boy Scouts, but plenty of room for the guy down in that poisoned all the people with the Kool-Aid, whatever his name was.
Oh, Jim Jones?
Jim Jones.
That's right.
Jim Jones.
Would have been a nice
Plenty
scout
room,
leader, wouldn't he?
Plenty of room for a whirling dervish, but no room for a genius in a wheelchair. Can't have that. So that's how stupid that is.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation up in Madison, Wisconsin, claimed in a statement that this rule is based on bigotry. And their statement I really like. It said, quote, "No one can be the best kind of citizen when they're told it's their duty to discriminate on the basis of religion." That's, unquote. That's really the truth of the whole situation.
They're required to discriminate.
Exactly. And you know, here we are now, due to recent events of this particular month, having this whole issue of discrimination against the gay and lesbian community brought into the forefront of the culture as a result of the religiously inspired massacre when a law-abiding citizen walked into the nightclub with a high-powered weapon and killed, at last count, 49 people because of religious bigotry, the very same type being endorsed by the Boy Scouts of America. Clearly an organization that has no respect for the Constitution of this country.
You know, I was a Boy Scout, and not just your everyday Boy Scout. I was a Boy Scout from the time I was old enough, 12, because I was a Cub Scout before that. But I joined the Boy Scouts at the age of 12. At the age of 16, I became an Explorer Scout with a different green uniform. And I was actually active in scouting until I got married. I was 19 years old when I got married. That matters much, but and I was in the Order of the Arrow. Anybody who gets a 21 merit badges can be an Eagle Scout, but in order to be in the Order of the Arrow, you have to be elected by your fellow Scout members, and you have to pass an ordeal and prove your ability to survive in the wild and perform certain kind of fire building and self-feeding functions and so on. So it's actually far more difficult. There are far fewer members in the Order of the Arrow than there are Eagle Scouts. That's pretty common. But from the time I was about 12 years old, I had stopped believing in God, so I was active in the Scouts for 6 years or more, even though I was clearly and openly a non-believer. But it never came up in scouting per se, even though I talked about it in Scouts, except that no one ever said, well, hey, you'll have to leave. Although today, they probably would. And I feel like I ought to return my merit badges as a form of protest. I'm embarrassed to say I was a member of that group.
Does loyal adherence to religion, Christianity, and God provide us with a better life? Well, speaking of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, they've erected a billboard in Mississippi which says God fixation won't fix this nation. It's a highway billboard in Tupelo. Message going up July 1st on a digital billboard. The message is very appropriate for Mississippi. The state is the most religious in the country, tied with Alabama, with some 77% of adult Mississippians saying they are, quote, very religious, according to the Pew Research Center. At the same time, it consistently ranks at or near the bottom in quality of life. Recent survey I saw in the paper earlier this week ranked all of the 50 states. I think Florida, if I recall, came in at number 40. But right down on the bottom, Mississippi and I think, was it Tennessee? It said Mississippi is the worst state in the country to live in. It has the lowest annual median household income and the highest poverty rate in the nation, as well as the lowest life expectancy. That always reminds me of your comment about the bum standing on the side of the street with a cardboard sign, homeless vet, please help, God bless. To which you usually comment,
don't worry, I'll pray for you.
If God's giving you his blessings, I'm driving around on my Jaguar. I think I'm something that affect you.
Better save a few of those blessings for yourself.
A lifetime member of that organization, by the way, is underwriting this sign, which is probably a pretty expensive proposition, but refuses to be identified. Gee, I wonder why. Even though Mississippi has a pattern of violations of the constitutional separation of state and church, the freedom from religion membership has been low in that state, and they're hoping they can get a little bit more adherence, a little bit more people coming out of the closet. It will happen eventually, but somebody's always got to be in last place. Meanwhile, here in Florida, an issue that will probably be decided by the time this program is even posted is in the news about the issue of the restrictions being placed on abortion clinics. Now, what we do know is that earlier this week, when the state of Texas attempted to continue to make it increasingly more difficult for women to obtain abortions, and being perfectly willing to sacrifice other health care issues for women in order to achieve that end, the state of Texas passed a lot of onerous regulations on these clinics in order to try to shut them down, figuring, well, since it's a national right to be able to have this kind of service, if they can't change the federal law, then they simply find ways to eliminate all the clinics in the state, and then nobody can get an abortion.
Well, if you can't afford it, or you can't be off work or gone from home long enough, because they've, it's not like they just started doing this. They've been introducing these laws by the dozens for decades now. You have to have a sonogram. You have to be told that it might cause you to be depressed later on.
Sure, they try to create environments where the patient needs to make multiple trips to the clinic and lose time off of work, and they give this stuff to us with a straight face, as if they're really helping these women. They're really concerned about their health and welfare, when it's clearly obvious their sole and exclusive intent in passing these laws is to attempt to eliminate any woman's right to choose whether or not she wants to bear children. And we all know it. They're fooling anyone except themselves into thinking they're fooling anybody, which they're not. Anyway, what the Supreme Court came up with earlier this particular week was they struck down the abortion restrictions in Texas. I think the decision was 5-3 in that case. And the judge who wrote the ruling is Stephen Breyer. He wrote that courts should weigh the medical benefits of abortion rules rather than taking state legislatures at their word when they say health and safety are their primary goal, because we all know that they are not concerned with that at all. They're concerned with imposing their religious ideology on everybody in the state, whether those people subscribe or not, which means they don't understand the most fundamental foundation of our civil liberties and our constitutional protections. They don't care. They always think that religion supersedes it, and they want all of us in line.
Well, it's baby murder is not constitutionally protected. I mean, that's the argument that you're always going to hear from this crowd. I like to refer to them not as the right to lifers, but as the right to birthers, because once you're born, you're pretty much on your own. In fact, a lot of them think that everyone is entitled to live long enough to be executed.
Well, there are three provisions to this law that, whether or not it gets passed or overturned, I thought were important for us to look at to see that the exact same thing's happening here in Florida. There are three provisions in the legislation signed into law by possibly the worst governor in the history of Western civilization, Florida's Governor Rick Scott, who should be in jail for life for all the money he stole from the Medicare system. But as Joan Mitchell said, steal a loaf of bread, they put you in jail. Steal $1 million, they make you a king. So, obviously, he heard the song and subscribed to it. The first one is blocking all taxpayer money for non-abortion services to abortion providers. These programs total about $500,000, according to Planned Parenthood, and include Medicaid funds for preventive services like cancer screenings and HIV testing, as well as a teen dropout program in Palm Beach County. So, as you can see, they're perfectly willing to sacrifice women's health in order to impose their religious agenda on us.
At the same time, they want to cut back on food stamps, unemployment. They want to have mandatory drug testing for anyone who's getting any kind of benefits, earned or unearned benefits. It's more than a little frustrating. It really is. It's an insult to our morals. It's an insult to our intelligence. It's an insult to our integrity. It's an insult to our Constitution. Fuck them.
And I haven't even gotten to the second provision yet.
Thank you.
So keep winding up, Joe. The second one requires that half of all abortion records in the state, which is approximately would be as many as 30,000, be inspected every year by state regulators. What a colossal waste of money.
They don't have enough money to inspect all these rape kits that have
that have been backlogged for 10 years, right?
Backlog, but they got plenty of money to
it's
check
just
on,
unbelievable.
on whether or not.
How do these people function with a straight face? The third one is defining the trimesters of a pregnancy, which Planned Parenthood says could limit some of their clinics by shortening the time period when they're allowed to provide abortions. So, it's just another gimmick, another scheme to try to keep women from having their choice. It's just taking the choice away from women because men are making those laws, right? So we'll see what happens with that, but it probably will be, if the court doesn't overturn it, I feel certain that Planned Parenthood will continue to pursue women's rights and their abilities to have access to these clinics. It's just kind of shame we live in a state that's so backward. Incidentally, speaking of the Freedom of Religion Foundation, Freedom from Religion Foundation, they also brought an issue of taxation on the residences of the clergy,
yes,
I believe. And
yes,
you have some
did.
information on that, I hope, because I'm sitting here flat-footed.
Okay. Well, as a matter of fact, they did. One of the questions that we get asked very frequently is, and I see it all the time on the news sites and on the questions and answers sections after various articles, and that is, if you don't believe in God or if you don't believe in deities, what difference does it make to you if other people believe in them? And in point of fact, it doesn't. I don't think it should be a crime to be gullible, but it does matter to me because they seem to feel strongly that their belief system, whether it makes sense or whether it doesn't, gives them certain rights to impose their values on myself and on society in general, and it gives them certain privileges when it comes to the necessity to pay taxes. In other words, they want you to pay for their religion. This is not false statement by any stretch. There are some places in this country, some cities that are 25 to 50% of the real estate of the property in the city or its environs is tax-free because it's owned by various religious organizations. Our own county seat of Clearwater, Florida, is overrun by Scientologists, and it causes them a perennial tax problem, which is absorbed and made up by the rest of us, whether we like the Scientologists or not. But there are plenty of Baptists and Presbyterians and religious entities by the thousands that are sucking at the public trough just as much as the Scientologists. Here's the proof.
Oh.
This is a printout of the churches in Pinellas County, Florida. Tax exempt.
That is unbelievable.
Right? Some of these places have $10, $20 million properties. That doesn't include the manses. We're going to get to those in a moment. The housing for the clergy themselves, which are also tax exempt. This is just the churches. It doesn't include the apartment buildings they own, the schools, the retirement homes, the hospitals, the shopping centers. Who knows? The point is, they're not paying any taxes on any of this, and yet they certainly use the fire services and the police services. They use the police on Sundays and other days of the week to direct traffic and so on and so forth at greatly reduced rates or for free in many cases. So that's what interests me among the reasons I'm interested in religion, and that is I don't want to have to pay for other people's opinions. I don't want to pay for other people's guesses, because that's what religion is. It's just a guess. Okay? Nothing wrong with guessing, as long as you pay for your own guesses and as long as you take the heat and suffer the benefits and or the consequences of those beliefs and of those ideas. So here's millions of dollars a year that just the citizens of Pinellas County have to go into their pockets in order to support the Scientologists and the Muslims and the Baptists and the you name it. There are 33,000 different, almost 34,000 different Christian denominations in the world. That's just Christian, doesn't count the other 10,000 religions or so. They come and go like mushrooms, basically, after a summer rain. In any case, that would be one of the number one reasons, as I said several times so far, that I am opposed to organized religion in any form, and that is, I don't want to have to pay for it. And by God, if your deity isn't willing or isn't able to support his own believers, why the hell should the taxpayers of Pinellas County or Hillsborough County or Florida or anywhere have to pick up the slack? Okay? Jesus went down to the seashore, sent his crew down there to get some fish and take the gold coins out of their mouths, and he paid his taxes so he could preach in Capernaum. And there's no reason why his oblates can't do that in Pinellas County or anywhere else on this planet. I think that's a good example. So let the fish support them, and then we won't have to.
Of course, the thing is, you've got to establish a criteria here, Joe, because you have a lot of very worthwhile nonprofit organizations operating in the communities. Meals on Wheels, the programs that really do benefit the public
and those,
in a tangible way.
Those groups are held to a very close accounting of how much of what they take in is spent on salaries and promotion, and how much goes to whatever, good works or charity or you name it. I'm not opposed to those churches that are actually providing services to the community, that they receive a tax deduction for doing that. I have no opposition to that, but I think that even the slightest examination will show that that's a very small percentage of the $100 billion a year that they take in tax-free on a federal level, not counting state and local tax deductions, etc.
But couldn't it be a potentially tricky issue to define what it is that they do that is considered to be an acceptable service to
we'll
the
just
community,
have to
right?
try.
Yeah, but but it would.
I don't think it would be any trickier than it is for nonprofits such as ourselves. We have to justify our existence in great detail every year.
We do.
I don't think it'd be any trickier for a religious organization to do that than it would be for us.
And of course, if we did all pay property taxes and there were no exemptions for any kind of charitable organization or educational organization or community service type of an organization, we would all pay much lower taxes.
That's right.
Because we'd all be paying into the pool.
And the need for those services would go way down because the secular arm and the government does deliver those services at a very economical fashion, more so actually than most sectarian operations. Speaking of which, trying to determine what ought or ought not to be thought of as a legitimate expense, I think it's Kenneth Copeland up in Lakeland. He has a I saw this on the internet, so I can produce the documentation if necessary. But he owns a $6+ million home up in Lakeland, of which he pays no taxes on whatsoever, because it's his manse. It's Florida and almost every other state in the union allows the property where the clergy lives to be tax exempt, as well as the church. The bishop, the Catholic bishop of St. Pete, lives in a $500,000 mansion out on Whedon's Island, which all of us help to foot the bill for because he's not paying for it, and he's not paying any taxes on it either. So I'm tired of paying for people to live in a $6 million house and subsidizing people who really ought to be in jail, in my estimation.
And of course, there you would have a very clear delineation,
but
of why they should pay taxes. They're living in the house. The house isn't doing any good for the community. It's doing good for them that live there. So let them pay like everybody else. And of course, if
they have to have some place to park their jets.
And if everybody's property taxes were lowered, then the argument could be made they would have more money in their pocket at the end of the day to donate to these religious organizations so they could pay their share too. But we, who never employ these institutions of medievalism and superstition, would not need to be subsidizing them.
In fact, we get screwed on this deal coming and going. The churches urge you to tithe, to give 10% at least of your pre-tax income directly to them. And this is deductible dollar for dollar from your income taxes. So we get to pay for this generosity, those of us, whether we believe it or whether we don't, even those of us who might be strongly opposed to it. But then, if you took this, the Bible's pretty clear that you'll be rewarded tenfold, 100-fold, some folds. But I guarantee you that the vast majority of those tithers, unless they had a really tidy income and were able to save money above and beyond their Social Security, and something like 40% of the people in this country couldn't come up with $400 in an emergency. I saw that poll on that a few weeks ago.
Oh, man.
So the point is that by the time they're old enough to be reaping the rewards, had they taken this 10% and put it into some sort of an annuity, which would have made them a millionaire, instead they get to be 65 years old and they got about $12,000 a year to live on from Social Security, which is enough to live under a bench, basically. And so we have to pay, again, for their support and maintenance in their twilight, golden years, because the $1 million that they would have had if they had put that money in an account for themselves instead of giving it to buy themselves a little better something in the hereafter, they'd all be better off in the here and now, and so would we.
This is just an aside, but I was always puzzled why our public school curriculum doesn't teach those fundamentals about saving and investing. They don't even teach us how to balance a checkbook. At least they didn't when I was in school in the 60s.
I
and
never
thrown
took
out in the world,
courses
we didn't.
along that line.
Yeah.
They ought to teach, they ought to require you to take at least 2 semesters of logic as well to go with it. Because there's nothing like logic and money management to get you on the right side of the religious question in a hurry. So anyhow,
well,
I
we are the bastions of logic here at Atheists of Florida and invite you to join us as a member or simply check in occasionally on our website to see what we're up to. Some of the things we do besides these Atheist Forum programs are outreach events, and we offer to members in good standing free legal consultation. So if you think you have a legitimate state-church separation issue, some kind of discrimination that you would like to address, you can come to us and we can find somebody that will tell you if you actually have a legitimate legal issue that you could tackle.
Keep in mind, we don't offer legal advice ourselves.
Not ourselves, but
Please.
we do have counsel available for our members. So we publish our newsletter on our website as well as in paper form for paid members who may want to just sit down and read the document in hand instead of on a computer screen. We operate out of Tampa, Florida, and next year celebrate our 25th anniversary of existence. So we'd invite you to consider joining and supporting this worthwhile organization called the Atheists of Florida. Joe, any parting words before we let our visitors go?
No, I don't, Ed.
How about tax the church?
Yes, tax the churches. It's only fair.
We produce these programs weekly and try to address a lot of the current events that affect us as the members of the community of reason. So we invite you to be with us again on the next Atheist Forum here on our website, where you can. This is the easiest place to find us at AOF.NGO. So until the next time, along with Joe Reinhardt, I'm Ed Golly, reminding you if the story seems just a little too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because somebody wrote it down.
Make them prove it.
Ooh.